Free socks.
Test 1 2 3. Test 1 2 3. We're good to go.
What's going on, snoozers? Do not adjust your screen. Yes, my beard is gone. Sadly, it's just getting to be a little too much, and not going to a barber yet. So I was like, man, you know what? Let's just take it off. It'll grow back. So I kind of got an idea of what I want it to grow to for my wedding in May of next year. So, this is a good starting point. Thomas, your beard is still looking glorious. But hey, we can't all be like you, right? How you doing today, Thomas?
I'm doing pretty good. You look good with the trimmed beard. I know you said your beard is gone. It is not gone. You still have a beard. It's just not as thick as it was. But, just keep myself busy, have some things happen in my life that I'm trying to prepare for. So at this point, it's just, working on those day-to-day checklists and getting everything done.
Now, you've got some new scenery coming your way next week. Is that correct?
Possibly. Technically, I may still be here next Monday when we record. I don't know exactly where I'm going to be, but definitely in 2 weeks I'll have a new background. So stay tuned for that.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing some liveliness behind you. No offense to your bland wall right now, but we got to try and spruce up your scenery and your background. That's my goal. For you, Thomas, is to get you some background stuff going on there.
Well, you've definitely seen one of the backgrounds that I might have at my next place. So
yeah,
I know the audience hasn't, but I know you have. So that's something that you proposed. So that's definitely in the mix.
And it was all the rage from all of us, not just me. Everyone was all about your background that day when we had that meeting.
Yeah, I definitely got a lot of comments about that for sure.
Well, time to get down to our segments. Of course, our segments. I said it wrong last week. Our first segment is Sleeping On, where we tell you what we feel that you may have been sleeping on and need to check out. So, Thomas, as always, we'll start with you. What have people been sleeping on?
Well, like usual, I do talk about something that is not necessarily something that you're probably keeping an eye on. Maybe the audience isn't keeping an eye on. And yeah, it's sports related, but it is overseas. So maybe some of y'all missed this. So the Premier League has been testing a lot of their players, and they just had a fourth round of tests. Over 1,100 players and club staff members were tested. 0 positive tests. Obviously a huge step forward for professional soccer in Europe. So that's definitely an exciting sign for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, that is actually really interesting to hear that, 0 people have tested positive for COVID. That's a great sign for us. Everyone in the sports world is obviously paying close attention to that. So yeah, that's really good to hear, Thomas.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think once more and more sports leagues get closer to resuming, I think we'll start seeing probably less and less cases, the further we get from March. So hopefully that's the case in America as well.
Yeah. Well, for me, I always try and get away from sports for my Sleeping On segment, and this week will be no different. For those of you watching, you can see my shirt Plus Ultra. This is from manga. I don't know if anyone knows what manga is out there in the world, but it's basically the Japanese version of comics. And this one is from My Hero Academia. It's a very great manga or anime if you like watching anime as well. For those that don't know, it's about a kid in high school. He gets in a world full of superhero people. He doesn't have any superpowers. He ends up getting some, and it's about that journey, and just a really great and uplifting thing to read. So if you're a fan of reading comics of any kind, if maybe you've stuck to DC and Marvel most of your life, definitely go and check it out. It's called My Hero Academia. But that is what I feel like some people may have been sleeping on, especially when it comes to our audience. Thomas, are you a fan of any type of comics whatsoever?
No, it's been a while since I've been into any type of animated series like that. I grew up with, Pokemons and Digimons and stuff like that. Nothing compared to the, a very intense and very developed animes that you see from Japan today. So, yeah, I have very limited knowledge on the whole anime scene.
Oh man, I'm big into it. You can't see it right now, but to the left and to the right of my camera are a bunch of anime Funkos. So definitely big into that scene, and definitely check it out if you are as well. Well, that is our sleeping on segment. Moving on as always, now we transition to our sports talk for snooze, because that's what we all are all about. And today's mainly playoffs related. So we'll start with the NHL, and the NHL has come out and said that, hey, yeah, we're gonna return. We have a couple of playoff scenarios. Their biggest one seems to be that it may be a 24-team affair, kind of where the top 4 teams play in the first round to kind of seed themselves 1 through 4, and everyone else kind of plays like a regular playoff format, and then it kind of goes from there. Thomas, what do you think about this kind of scenario that the NHL has proposed?
It's definitely interesting. I get why both the NHL and NBA are planning on having expanded playoffs this year. 24 does seem like a lot, especially with the NHL only having 30 teams. Obviously, when you look at it compared to the NBA, the NBA is proposing smaller postseasons, and we'll get in that in a few minutes. But 24, I get the setup. You basically give the top 4 seeds in both conferences a first-round bye in a sense, and then they're not just going to have a bye. They're going to be playing each other, the other top 4 seeds in their conference, for seeding, which I'm very shocked that you would get the first and second seeds in both conferences to agree to that, because if you had the top record when the season concluded, you could potentially end up with the 4th seed in your conference. And so if you're like a Dallas Stars fan, obviously you're a 4 seed, it's a great positive for you. But if you're a 1 or 2 seed and you're going to potentially drop, I don't see how that's beneficial to them and why they would be able to agree on that. So that's my biggest concern with that.
Let me interject with this. I mean, there's obviously not going to be any one perfect way to do this, and part of me thinks they're doing it this way maybe is to get teams accustomed to playing actual games again.
That's a good point.
It seems like they're going to jump right into it. There's not going to be any more regular season games, and so to allow them a couple of games to get their feet. Now, yes, in that regard, there could potentially be some upsets where, maybe this team that had no shot of getting into the playoffs before happens to let's say, for instance, right now, Edmonton's the 5 seed, Chicago's the 12 seed. Maybe Chicago comes out and upsets them. They had no shot of getting into the playoffs before, but now they are in. So there's that potential, of course, which may seem unfair, but I think when you look at it from maybe a coaching standpoint and maybe even from the player side as well, it's, hey, we got to get, back to playing speed anyways. And this kind of first round kind of gives us that ability to do so. And so I think you have to take some of the good with the bad. What do you think about that?
I'm not necessarily opposed to them having an expanded postseason, because obviously, these teams were not able to finish out their full regular season. And, a lot of these races, and the same way with the NBA, you have teams that are just on the outside looking in. And, if they were to finish out either a 72 or 82 game regular season, there's still a chance that they could make up the ground and, obviously take the final seed or 2. And so I get why both the NBA and NHL are expanding for this postseason. I guess my two, arguments against what the NHL has proposed is, 24 seems like a lot, 12 in each conference, and then obviously I'm not a big fan of the 1 through 4 playing 4 seeding. I get the point that you made about, obviously they're trying to get these players back to game speed. Maybe what you do instead is, the top 4 seeds they play teams that have already been eliminated from this 2014 playoff, to kind of get them somewhat ready. But then you also still recognize the, regular season standings and how they were seeded once COVID had suspended the season. So, like I said, I'm not opposed to the expanded. I get why they're adding extra teams. I just think the NHL went a little too far with the 24. Maybe they could have gotten down to, 20. I think 20 is a good number. At least it's a more of a, I don't know. It's like 2/3 out of the league made the playoffs instead of a little bit more than 2/3. So, but like I said, I'm not opposed to the whole expanded postseason. I just think there's a couple things that they got wrong.
Now, what about this idea of having 10 hub cities to host the games? Right now, they said that those cities are Chicago, Columbus, Dallas, Edmonton, Vegas, L.A., Minneapolis, St. Paul, Pittsburgh, Toronto, and Vancouver. Is this a good idea to have it in 10 cities? Do you think they might try and do where you play one whole series in a city? What kind of ideas do you think might happen around these 10 hub cities, Thomas?
Well, I know the 10 cities are obviously in the mix to host in these games. I don't believe all 10 are going to be used, but I believe one city is going to be designated for the Western Conference. One's going to be designated for the Eastern Conference. Obviously, there's states that have started to open up more than others. Obviously you mentioned Dallas. Dallas would probably be a good spot, especially with Abbott saying that you can start having some fans at professional sporting events. So I do like that mix. With everything that's happened over the last week, we don't need to get into it. Minneapolis, St. Paul is probably not the right town right now to host a big sporting event like this. I know we're probably weeks away from the NHL returning, but I think at this point it's good to try to find places that not only were not hit hard and are starting to reopen like a Texas, but also find a place that might be able to host some fans. I think the NHL said that they're not going to have fans for the postseason. I may be wrong on that, but I think I heard that. But this would give the NHL, another, thought. Okay, well, if there is a state that is safe, that has allowed some fans in, obviously playoff hockey is amazing, and part of that is the fans' engagement. So, maybe there's a way for the NHL to, pick states that are starting to allow fans at professional sporting events like Texas. Dallas obviously is a great hockey city with the Stars, so I think Dallas would be a great spot to host it. Plus, it's centrally located too.
Yeah, well, I mean, and everyone's going to be waiting on bated breath if that happens to see what the results of that are.
Oh, absolutely. I think we're starting to see. It seems like every week more and more states are, really kind of alleviating these restrictions. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next couple of weeks. If enough states have allowed fans at sporting events, and obviously there are states that are some of these hub cities that the NHL is considering for their postseason if the season resumes, then the commissioner might backtrack his statements and be like, okay, well, maybe we're allowed to have a portion of these arenas filled so that we have some type of not understanding, but like similarity to what we usually expect at a NHL hockey postseason.
Well, we know one organization that might be starting around the same time as NHL, that might be paying a little attention to what they're doing, is the NBA. We will talk NBA playoff scenarios, but before we do that, I want to talk about Damian Lillard. Not just him, but he was obviously probably the biggest name to say something to cause this kind of, I guess you would say, debate. And that's if some of these players who are going to potentially be on teams that have no shot of making the playoffs, whatever scenario may be, might just sit out. Before I give you my take, what do you think on this? Do you think it's I wouldn't say fair, but do you think players that have no shot of making playoffs should sit out on a season that is now useless for them?
I mean, I understand his concern for sure because, I mean, obviously COVID disrupted not only everyone's lives at this point, but, these athletes, especially professional athletes like Damian Lillard, they're practicing, they're working out, they're training, they're doing everything to kind of keep their bodies, at this very high level so that they compete at a high level. And, obviously COVID has disrupted a lot of this. I know in some NBA cities, they're starting to allow practice facilities to start opening up, but there's been such a delay that, especially if, the NBA does go to that 30-team, model where they decide to, finish out a 72 game regular season instead of the full 82 to get, some more guys, some playing time, even if they're, already eliminated for the postseason. I can see why some of these, especially these high profile athletes, don't want to, potentially hurt themselves or do something to, affect the rest of their playing career. So I get his proposal, and that's why I think it's very unlikely that we're going to have all 30 teams playing. Really, in my mind, I think whoever, whatever group of teams that they want, whether it's 16, 20, 22, I think that group of athletes, they all know that they have a shot, and, they're all going to be willing to play. There's no reason to bring the Warriors back this year. They're completely out of it. The Knicks, there's no reason to bring them back. They're completely out of it.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you and with Damian Lillard. It's one of those things, and I think it was who's that quarterback from the Lions that's on First Take now and on ESPN?
Oh, Orlovsky.
Orlovsky, yeah, I know he really was in disagreement with it, but you gotta look at it this way. I mean, he's one of your star players, one of the best players in the league. Why should he go back and potentially injure himself for the 2021 season when he has when really there's nothing he can do to make right now? One of the scenarios he would be in, and so he might play, and we'll get to that in a second. But if they just say, hey, top 8 from the West, top 8 from the East. Right now, Portland's not in that.
Yeah.
So why should he come back and play? And it's the same what you said with the Warriors. I mean, the Warriors they're right now they're the only team mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. Why should any of their starters come back and play, potentially risk injuring themselves for the next season? And I mean, he brings up some valid points and valid arguments as far as why should we play in a season that is meaningless for us. And so I'm in complete agreement with him in that regard. And it seems like the NBA may have maybe heard that. And so that's going to lead us into our next topic, which is NBA scenarios. And so one of the scenarios they have is it's the 16 teams, plus 4 more, which I think all 4 of those teams are from the West, because I think it's the next 4 with the best records in the NBA, which at that point are the 9th through 12th seeds in the West. So I think it's the Trailblazers, Pelicans, Spurs, and Kings. And so that kind of method may give, it's kind of the not play in, but just to get them warmed up a little bit. You add a few more teams to get them a little loose, so that way when you get deeper in the playoffs, the action's a little bit better. Everyone's a little bit more smoother and up to speed when they get to the the conference semis and then the conference finals and stuff like that. So what do you think about this? I know there's a couple, and you can talk about some of the other proposed methods, but this is, I think, the main one that's getting a lot of traction right now. What do you think about these NBA playoff proposals?
Well, that's the one that I favor, is the 20 team. And that's not just because I'm a Spurs fan. I mean, when you look at it, obviously you mentioned, Lillard is in that group of 4 that would obviously expand the postseason, if you want to call it, to 20. Obviously, they would have some type of World Cup style group stage, which I think is really interesting. I think this could be something that, down the line, whether it's next year, if this is successful this year and they're able to do it, that you might be able to expand. Because I think the thing is, especially with those teams, I mean, not only is the West loaded every single year, where you have teams that, really from probably 8 to 12, 13 in the West, there isn't much difference in between them, and you give more teams a shot. to stay competitive. For this season, not only do you have Lillard in this final group, I know you have Zion in that group, and I know at this point the NBA is trying to get as many ratings as possible. And I think, having 20, they're all going to this tournament. Everyone is going to be involved. I mean, the thing when, if you were to go to the 22, really there's a chance that, you may not make it into the postseason. Like, it's like, you have to play a couple games, and then you have like this play-in tournament, and then you would get into the tournament. To me, the 20, where you're basically included in this tournament, all 20 teams are going to be doing this group stage thing. To me, that's where you're going to have the most investment from these players, especially, for those that may be on the edge about, coming back this season. I think if you're, having a guaranteed spot and you're able to get some more big-time playmakers into this tournament, I think this is the 20 team is the way to go.
Yeah, and I think they're also, one of the things they're saying is that obviously, and I think we mentioned it earlier, is they will play in Orlando. This one, I think, if I remember correctly, Thomas, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they won't have fans in the stands, or they might allow like family members in the stands. Is that correct, Thomas?
I believe so. That's what I've heard.
Yeah, but I think it makes it. I think the NBA is a business, and so one of the things they have to do is bring in those ratings, and so bringing in the teams like the Portland Trail Blazers and especially the Pelicans with Zion into the playoff mix is going to draw people in. I mean, you saw what the ratings were when Zion first came in, and yeah, he's not maybe up to speed yet, and how this time off have affected anyone really, but people are going to want to see Zion in the playoffs, and so I think adding in those four extra teams to give not only give the fans something exciting to watch, but even to give teams a chance to kind of get up to basketball speed and then playoff basketball speed. I think it will be beneficial, even if some of the teams, maybe like Memphis, for instance, might not necessarily agree with it. Do you think having this format is going to be a detriment to any teams? I know I mentioned like Memphis, but can you think of maybe do you think this could hurt potentially like the Lakers, the Clippers, or the Rockets?
You mean like the 20 team in Orlando?
Yeah, do you think having something like that might hurt those type of teams?
I think so. I mean, because I know a lot of these teams, actually all these teams, whether they were already in the postseason or not, top 16 or not, going in the season, they were expecting to go through their conference. And so, there's a chance that, you might get some big-time matchups earlier on in the postseason that, especially if you're from the Eastern Conference, you're expecting... if you're a Milwaukee or somebody like that, you're expecting a pretty easy cakewalk. And now you might play a Clippers team or a Lakers team earlier in the postseason, and they weren't supposed to face them until obviously like the NBA Finals. So I think it'll cause some tougher matchups for some of the top teams, but also when you have conference list playoffs, you're going to have some interesting matchups where, maybe teams aren't as familiar, may not have a heated rivalry that you usually expect out of a conference, playoff game. So, there's going to be some differences, but I think this is the right move. Have it at one site, do it in a state that's starting to re-up like Florida. Obviously, I know, Orlando's a NBA city. They won't be playing at the Magic Arena, but I know they have some facilities over at Disney World, so that are obviously capable of hosting an event like this. And you mentioned it, with this season, especially if they were to finish the season, it's all about the TV ratings without really many people in the arena besides the players and coaches and staff, maybe some family members as well. And so it's really going to be dependent on the TV viewership. And, I think if you're having some big-time guys like the Lillards and Zions in there, in addition to everyone else that was already expected in there, it's going to be a pretty awesome TV event.
Here you go, Thomas. This is the number one reason why this 20-team playoff should be implemented, and that's because the San Antonio Spurs will have made the playoffs for 23 straight years, which will break their tie with the Philadelphia 76ers for 22 right now. And I don't care if there's an asterisk, that still makes them number one, sole first place. And that's why this 20-team playoffs needs to happen, Thomas.
Hey, I'm so glad you brought that up, because obviously that is something I was excited about. I know we were texting about that last week, and yeah, I didn't. When the whole COVID thing started, I know we've talked about it, and I think we've even talked about it either on this show or the last show about if we thought the Spurs had any chance to make it in the playoffs, and I never thought that this day might come, and it's getting closer to that. So, yeah, I also have my fingers crossed about this 20 team or potentially 22. Like I said, I like the 20 a little bit more. I think you have more of a guaranteed spot in this postseason from what I'm understanding compared to the 22. So, yeah, I'm really hoping for that 20-team playoff in a couple weeks.
Yeah, well, we're into June now, so we will be finding out what it's going to be here. I would say I wouldn't be surprised if we found out some more information about either of these playoff scenarios by the end of this week. So
yeah, it sounds like they're planning on voting on it, and there's a good chance that one of these are going to go through. So I'm definitely excited for the news this week.
Yeah, we'll definitely keep you informed as we make as this information becomes available. Hey, who knows? Next week we may be talking about this again because it's been approved. But until then, that is our show for this week. So before we go, as always, Thomas, where can people get a hold of you if they're trying to find out more about you?
Yeah, follow me on social media at TextNation. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I also have a YouTube channel, Thomas Bingham. So hit me up there, give me a follow, give me a like on whatever I post. And obviously, I like Josh does on his accounts, we promote the show multiple times a week. So stay tuned for that. And what's your stuff, Josh?
Well, before that, Thomas, when can we get another video of like that Waterberg one? I mean, I really liked it. When are you gonna tease us with when we might be expecting another one of those videos?
I'm definitely planning on doing another one. I haven't nailed down which one I want to do. I'm trying to find either a unique one or something that's kind of new on the market. So I'm still working on that investigation, but I'm sure I'll definitely promote it once that thing approaches and ultimately gets published.
Well, we'll definitely on this show, once we know, if you want to promote it on the show, definitely excited to hear about what's next. I really enjoyed the first one. So, yeah, moving on, like you said, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at JoshWack13. Facebook is just Joshua Slosick. And then, of course, our YouTube page is S-News. Like Thomas said, on especially Twitter and Facebook, we post little clips from the show with links to the YouTube page. Definitely go ahead and watch that. I also want to shout out my cousin Michael. He went ahead and shouted us out on his he does some Twitch live streams every now and then, and he gave us a little shout out this past week, so thank you very much for that. But until next week, guys, thanks as always for tuning in, and until then, don't forget to keep hitting that snooze button. Later, guys.